about grading, because grading is probably the worst part of group work. At least for me it is. I hate the grading part of group work. I really hate the grading part of teaching. Grading is just not my favorite thing. But I know it's valuable and important, and students need the content from you so that they know whether or not they're on track. So here's some of the research. If you put students and you give a group grade, this is what happens. You get a nice vanilla, generic C or B or whatever, and the high-functioning students are pulled down by the low-functioning, and the low-functioning, they're quite happy. They're pulled up by the high-functioning, and you get this nice middle-of-the-road, pretty meaningless grade. Right? So research is pretty clear on that. We've all had that experience. We may have all been in a group like that at some point in our lives. Here's what students say. I'll give you a second to read that. Not shocking, right? So students who don't get group work or don't want to do group work, they're like, yeah, group grades. Students who get group work and are, maybe real serious about school, yuck, group grades, please. It's a disaster. I mean, some of them really freak out about it, especially if they're trying to get into a competitive program and they're really concerned about their grades. They don't want this to happen. So these students hate group grades. These students love group grades, right? So I also worried about introverts a little bit, with the grading and group work. Is it damaging to folks that aren't extroverted? I'm an extroverted person by nature, as you probably already figured out, but not everybody else is. What they showed with this particular study was that the extroverts and introverts really didn't have a significant difference in terms of group work and independent work, although the introverts seem to do a little bit better on the exam. So maybe we're not being fair to extroverts on the exams. I don't know. But anyway, I don't think there's a big cause for alarm, really, to worry about some people. Although they may not be comfortable in that role, they can be effective in that role. So there's no data that supports introverts kind of having a negative impact. So now you have the question, should you let them grade themselves? Should peers be grading them? And basically, by and large, you're going to get inflated grades if you go that route. So the research is kind of clear about that you're going to get some inflated grades. So it's not easy to really figure out how you should grade them, but I have moved away from group grades, and I've almost only given individual grades for group projects. And I can do that because they're randomly assigned a part of a presentation, so I give them a grade based on their part. Some of it has to be shared because their final PowerPoint has to be shared. There's some elements of it, the resources that they all pulled together. So there's elements that are kind of shared, but I'm grading them independently. And I'm also, I'm just going to skip this for a second, I'm also linking the assignments like I told you before. So they got an individual grade on the paper. I asked them all to create a PowerPoint so that I don't just have a PowerPoint whiz creating the PowerPoint. So everyone's getting an individual grade on a PowerPoint, and then they get together as a group and they mix and mingle them to make the best PowerPoint they can. So they're mingling all the best and making the best product that they possibly can. But they just got an individual grade on their PowerPoint also. So I'm giving grades along the way. So the final product grade doesn't have to be like a gigantic one, and it is mostly individual. And the reason for that is just because I don't want this to happen. And I did just about all of the options out there. I had everybody grading each other. I had averaging. I was spending hours and hours calculating these peer grade things that I don't even know if they were good at grading. I mean, let's face it, folks, grading is hard. Now we're putting peers in a position to grade each other. That's not fair. I really don't think it's fair because you're asking them to engage in a skill that is not their job to grade their peers. It is not what they didn't sign up to be a teacher. You signed up to be a teacher, so you have to grade, right? So this is what you do, but they didn't. So I don't really think it's very fair of us to ask peers to grade one another. Now, feedback is a different story. I'm not against or opposed to feedback, and I have used a variety of ways to do that. Sometimes I'll use some kind of accountability log, keeping track of who's doing what. And actually, most recently, I'm going to tell you what I do is I just make them do their group work on the message board. I said, I want to see the message board with all the group work, because then I can see who's adding content, which is the substance of it, right? Who's adding ideas. So in order for you to get a final product, you're going to have to share resources anyway. You're going to have to create something. I want you to do it via the message board because then I can see who's doing what. just the matter of me, they know that I can see it, increases their accountability and makes it less likely to have an uneven, kind of thing happening in the group. And I tell them, I'm going to go through that as I'm grading you. So your grade isn't just how well you did in your 3 minutes of fame up here, but also how much you contributed to the group process. So I'm looking at your contributions. Were they significant or were they not? So that's kind of what I've been doing. And again, I'm not telling you it is magical or phenomenal, but it's kind of been a process that I've been going through, and I've moved away from the group grades. The other reason that I moved away from the group grades is that some evidence shows that group grades actually decreases interpersonal relationships because you can increase conflict and hostility in the group if it puts under pressure. So that's kind of one of the reasons. And these authors here, King and Benke, had said that, remember, not everything has to be graded. A lot of the group work you do, you don't have to grade everything. So you're doing it, as a learning experience, but not everything that they learn or do has to be graded. And they cautioned against firing members. And here's why they said that. They said, you are saying that it kind of, some of the folks say, well, models the real world. Well, not really. Do any of us get to fire any of our colleagues? Not really, right? You, as the instructor, may opt to get someone out of a group if they're bringing them down and give them an alternate assignment. And, certainly they can come to you and let you know if there's issues. But peers firing each other and grading each other, it seems that there's some literature that speaks to the negative, interpersonal relationships that can happen as a result of that. And our whole goal was to have more positive relationships. So I feel like it's a little counterproductive. So if you are going to do that, I just caution you to be very careful in the way in which you do that, and be mindful of the fact that it could have potentially a negative impact. Comments, questions, reactions to grading?